Hi, accredited investors. Hey, I'm so excited. We got a new deal right now. It's a 46-unit building, brick, solid brick, in the race horse capital of the world, Lexington, Kentucky. Rents on this thing, they're 15% below what the market rate is around it. I know because we own several buildings in the area. We're buying this one 15% less. To learn more, all you have to do is go to homeinvest.com or click on the description down below. Inside the description, you'll see a link down there. Remember, always consult with a tax advisor, a financial planner, or attorney before making any investment decisions. Having said all that, all you have to do is go to homeinvest.com or click on the link that you'll find down in the description down below. Thanks, God bless. Enjoy the show.
Are you looking to go from 3 or 4 single-family houses into your first multifamily? We have got the show for you today. We are going to be talking about how you do your due diligence and your underwriting on your first multifamily property. I'm joined by Nate Armstrong, the CEO and founder of Home Invest. We are an Inc. 500 company. My name is Steve Warner. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. We're going to be dealing with underwriting, due diligence. This is the numerical side of your due diligence, looking at the numbers, as well as the physical side when you tour the property so that you make sure you get a great investment. What are some of the things that we are going to be looking at, Nate? Let's go ahead and start with the numerical side. What are the things that we want to get from the seller, and what are we looking for?
Yeah, so whenever I'm asking a seller, and this is really crucial, whenever I'm asking a seller for items that I want to do due diligence on, I'm thorough. I put the whole list in front of them. So here it goes. I'm going to fire these off. You might have to go back and replay this so that you get them and you can write them down or at least take mental notes of it. But these are the ones that have saved us so many times in the past. Number one, I want the T12s. Stands for trailing 12 months of income and expenses. I want to see the entire year snapshot. Now, most sellers, especially if they're unprofessional, meaning they don't have a good bookkeeper on staff, they just show up once a year at their local accountant's office and kind of wing it. They're not going to have T12s. So you're going to have to ask them to produce the T12s. They probably have the information. It just might not be compiled in a beautiful report. But one way or another, I'm going to get the T12s. The other thing about T12s is that oftentimes they might have pulled it at the end of the year when their accountant did their books for them or their taxes for them, but they might not have it up to date, meaning up to right here, right now, the moment we're entering contract. So sometimes after I get the T12s, I'll look at it and I'll notice that it hasn't been pulled for some time. Then I'll go back and I'll ask for the T3s. You can probably guess what that stands for. That stands for the trailing 3 months of income and expenses. So I definitely want to get that. I also want to get things like the aged receivables. I want to get things like the leases. Leases tell so much, especially on properties that, let's just say that the owner bought them and you're looking through the T12s and you notice that 9 months ago, the property was struggling. They were only bringing in half the rent that they are today. And then just in the last 3 months, now all of a sudden the rent has lifted. It's higher and higher and higher. If you're looking at the T12s and you're like, how did they do this? How'd they bring their rents up so fast? I would encourage you to look closely at the leases. This is where you get to play a little bit of detective. Steve, do you remember back in the day that show Inspector Gadget? Inspector Gadget.
Of course.
Okay, so Inspector Gadget, he had this giant, what do you call that thing that you put in front of your eye, the magnifying glass? The periscope. Oh, he had a periscope, of course. You got to have this when you're doing due diligence. So when you get the T12s and you notice that all of a sudden there's a huge lift in rents, it's usually because right before a seller is going to sell, they'll work their butts off the 90 days before that. It's kind of like when a residential homeowner is going to sell their property, they finally get it cleaned, they finally get it repainted. They're going to hide the little imperfections the best they can. The same thing happens in multi all the time. These multifamily sellers, the last 3 months of ownership, they're doing everything to raise the rents. Sometimes they sign people up. They sign these leases with people that really ought not to be in the property. So when I'm seeing that on the T12s, then I'm automatically turning into Inspector Gadget, and I'm going to really drill down on these leases. If these leases, if they don't have the credit score attached to them, if they don't have the application that shows that they've got references and they've got, a good background check, I'm gonna really go back after the seller and say, hey, I want to see the app on this one. I want to see the app on this one, because that's usually where the problems get handed off to new owners.
That's a huge thing right there. Nate just shared with you, like going back, if this seems like a lot of work, imagine if you bought the property and they had a couple of these bad tenants in there who then don't pay rent and you have to go through eviction, you have to chase them for money. This is how you see that in the numbers up front. So, Nate, what if they just want to give you the T3? How do you compare the T3 to the T12 to actually see the difference in this?
Yeah, so if I just had the T3 in my hand and not the T12, then I'm going to automatically assume that the property was a mess 12 months ago. And I'm just going to ask, I'm just going to say, hey, like, you got nothing to hide with me. I just want to see it all. I got to see it all. Here's the deal: a lot of this stuff, you can actually, if you don't want to be the bad guy or sound like, the bad cop, you can just blame your lender. Most good lenders, they're going to ask for all of this stuff anyways. They're going to have their underwriters go through it. So that's how I usually push it. Like right now, we're in the middle of negotiating a 126 unit building down in Oklahoma City. And on this one, the sellers kind of put up a wall saying, hey, I don't want to provide that. I don't have those handy. And I just came back and I said, you know what? At the end of the day, we can't get a loan. A lender's never going to approve this unless their underwriters are able to see it. So one way or another, we got to pull it out. We got to produce it. What do you have? You got it on a spreadsheet? Maybe we can pull the report off of a spreadsheet. So you can point to the lender and blame the lender, make the lender the bad guy. Really, you need to know this stuff just as well as your underwriter does.
Okay, so we just went through a little bit of what the T3, the T12s, and what the numbers are on the front end. Now let's move and let's talk about what happens when you're actually physically at the property. Are you going into every unit? What kind of stuff are you looking for? How do we judge the property in a walkthrough?
Yeah, start on the exterior. You can do this before you even get access to any of the insides. The insides are important too, but on the outside, it's most important. You can see the expensive stuff first at eye level. You back up about 50 yards from the property and you stare straight at it, and you start looking at the lines starting with the ground level. If the ground level line is a perfectly flat line, the next line up should be the bottom of the door frames and the bottom of the window frames. Look for a line, a horizontal line that should be parallel to what the ground line would be. And then the next line up should be the top of the window frames. Look for that line to be parallel. And then you go up to the roof line. That line should be parallel as well. If any of those lines are not parallel, there's a good indication that there's something wrong with the property. Sometimes it's structural, sometimes there's roof problems. Whatever it is, like, parallel lines are supposed to exist on buildings. And if you don't see that, you gotta pump the brakes a bit and wonder what the heck is going on. The next thing is you're looking for is issues with grading. Grading means you have a slope that carries water out and away from a property when it rolls off of the roof. Most properties, one of the biggest problems, at least in the Midwest and some parts of the Southeast, is rain, water pushing into the ground. And then when it gets saturated enough, it starts to do damage to the slab or the foundation or the basement if it has a basement. You do not want water to be accumulating next to your property. Concrete is porous. It absorbs kind of like a sponge. So even if you've got a concrete foundation, if water is parked next to it the entire time, eventually it's going to cause problems. It could cause mildew, mold, all that kind of stuff. So you want to make sure that grading is taking water out and away from the property. If it's not, look for problems. Gutters, downspouts, they're similar tools that can help pull water out and away. Oftentimes they're clogged up with leaves or debris. You're looking for those kinds of things first to see if they're causing problems.
Awesome. And then last but not least, Nate, let's talk about like the cosmetics that you're looking for, because you want to make sure that you can go in and you can fix up units. You want to make sure that you can increase the NOI. But what cosmetics are you looking for with the property specifically?
Yeah, I'm looking to see what this owner and sometimes even the previous owner, how they took care of the property, because they really set the tone for the tenants that live in the property. I'll give you an example. Steve, you and I bought a beautiful brick building, a little 49 unit building year ago or so, maybe 9 months ago. And when we took over that building, like, there was trash all along the fence. There were two cars in the parking lot that had been there from previous tenants that got left behind somehow, and they were just junkers sitting there. And that it took down the overall feel. it made the next tenant that was potentially going to move in really scratch their head and say, do I really want to live here? And immediately, the week that we bought the property, we had those cars towed. We cleaned up the parking lot. We cleaned up the fence line. Like it just brought a vibrancy to it. So you're looking for those kind of cosmetic things first, because if you let a property start to feel, beat up and run down, tenants will start to add to that. They will start to drop their cups, their cigarettes, like whatever it is outside, and it just accumulates. So you want to immediately get rid of that stuff. But I look for those kinds of things first. And then the next cosmetic thing that I'm looking for is underneath the sinks. Is the sink dripping? Is it causing mildew and mold? Is it rotting out the cabinet? I'm looking near the washers and dryers. How are the connections, the fittings? Are any of the plumbing fixtures dripping water? Water is one of the biggest enemies inside of properties when it's dripping. So I'm always looking for those cosmetic things. I don't care so much about paint, carpet, flooring, those kinds of things I can fix. But water damage, foundation stuff, those are the stuff that gets really expensive.
Got it. All right, Nate. So we covered an overview of what you look for in the numbers, the T12s, the T3s, the leases. We covered what you look for when you're doing an overview of the property. Last piece I want to touch on, do you hire an inspector to go in and inspect the property during the due diligence period before the earnest money goes hard? Do you need to hire an inspector? And what are you looking for in their report?
Yeah, 110% of the time, if I can quantify it like that, meaning I do it 100% of the time now, and I'm going to add the 10% now for some times that back when I was a young, naive buck and I thought that I knew everything, that I skipped the inspector a couple of times and it cost me in the end. We don't do that anymore. I'll tell you that. Like you get an inspector every single time. Not even so much that, like, I'll give you an example, Steve. We've had the blessing and privilege of buying and selling over 1,700 units in our time here. We've done a lot. We have more experience than a lot of inspectors do, frankly speaking. The difference is that the inspector carries an insurance. The inspector has errors and omissions insurance. The inspector is being paid to climb up on the roof, to climb through crawl spaces, to really put some pressure testing on the plumbing, to fill that sink up with water, put the drain plug in, fill the sink up with water, and then pull the drain plug and see if it actually drains. The inspector is being paid to do those things. And if they miss something, they have some liability. They have some skin in the game, so to speak, because they have an insurance called errors and emissions insurance that we've had cases where the inspector's insurance paid out for misses that the inspector missed during inspections. So yes, you do want to have an inspector every single time.
Awesome. All right, guys, that's going to bring us to the conclusion of this three-part series. We started off with the first part and we went through how you find a great multifamily. If you're looking to trade up from 3 or 4 single families into your first multi, you're going to want to go listen to that one. We show you first off how you pick the general area where you would buy a multifamily, and then we look at how you actually find the off-market deals, because everything starts with a KOMD, killer off-market deal. The second part in this series, we went through how you get that property under contract, how you do the LOI, how you deal with the earnest money, and all the pieces in between. And then this episode, the third part in the series, we went through how you do your due diligence, both on numbers and on the physical property. If you'd like to learn more, you can always reach out to us through any of our emails that you have received. Just hit reply. We'd love to hear from you, or leave a comment down below. Until next time, this is Nate and Steve reminding you to be great stewards of what God has given you. Go out in the world, double, multiply what God has given you, create your ripple, and we will see you here on Purpose Driven Passive Profits.